Okay, what's going on, everybody? Josiah Shaver here, and it's been about a week and a half since COP26 ended. That's the UN Conference on Climate Change that happened in Glasgow, Scotland. I got to go, and this is going to be my video reflection, highlights and takeaways from what I learned, what I saw, and that whole experience. So here we go. I'm going to kind of do this in like a Q&A type style to hit all of these points I have. So let's get right into it. First point is, what was it like? All right, well, it was a whirlwind. It was kind of crazy and kind of hectic. So it was my first time flying alone, which was actually pretty fun. I feel pretty comfortable doing that now. Unfortunately, the airline lost my luggage somewhere along the way. And so I had to make do with the clothes I had on, basically. I had like some extra stuff and I had my bathroom stuff in my carry-on, which was good because my baggage showed up at where we were staying a couple days late. But no, traveling was pretty okay, but it was also crazy because to go to the conference, to get in, we actually had to get COVID tested every single day. They had these take-home packets, put the thing up your nose, and then it was like a self-reported. You fill out the app, fill out the form, and all that. So we did that every day. And then like the lines were kind of crazy. First couple days, it was actually like hour and a half getting in, which was wild. But got slightly shorter earlier on. And the thing was, it was long because security was really high first couple days. They had what was called the World Leaders Summit for Monday and Tuesday that I was there. And a bunch of world leaders, Biden was there. And a lot of these leaders were giving speeches at the kind of opening ceremony type stuff. And the security, was, as you can imagine, super high. And I think because of that, lines were a little slower and such. Trying to figure out what was going on, where things were, was wild. But it got better as we went on. What else here? Yeah, okay, next question. What is the Christian Climate Observers Program? So the Christian Climate Observers Program is the group that I was able to partner with and go as a team member with to COP26. It was a huge privilege, and they had a very selective process for who they allowed to go on this because of the limited seating, limited capacity because of COVID at a big event like this. So I'm very thankful that I could go. The Christian Climate Observers Program is designed to get Christians to this event, which happens every year. It's an annual event, so that we can be representing biblical environmental justice, biblical environmental stewardship, and love in action, being the hands and feet of Jesus on the world stage at events like this, and to demonstrate not only that faith in action and that ethic of stewardship, but also hope. Hope in Jesus and how that reflects in how we care for our world and for our neighbors in this world. So we didn't have any events that we organized within COP26, the official grounds itself, but we did have a few other events that we were a part of. One that really stood out to me was the Climate Vigil program, which is kind of a campaign to get Christian music more involved in the climate crisis and get more songs about that kind of thing, which was really cool. We kind of had the premiere event that I got to go do in a big old cathedral in Scotland. And that was awesome. And then there were some other like interfaith events where like faith leaders from a bunch of different faiths kind of came together to discuss, what our faiths say about environmental ethics, about climate change, and what we should do about it. Really cool stuff. And so I got to go as an observer. I got an official entrance pass into the blue zone. So you have like the blue zone, and then you have the green zone, and then you just have outside COP. The blue zone is where all the world leaders are meeting. It's like where events are really happening on the official level. So I was privileged to get a badge into there. Okay, next question. Highlights from the trip. What was it like? What were the highlights? All right, there's a lot here. So probably the number one thing was the people I met. I got to meet Dr. Catherine Hayhoe very briefly, but she's a really famous now climate scientist, Christian, evangelical Christian climate scientist, who's a professor also in Texas. And that was really cool. She has a lot of phenomenal work. So check her out if you haven't already. The Christian Climate Observers Program actually got to meet with Al Gore, former vice president, politician in the US. And that was really neat. We actually got to talk to him about his Christian faith, how that relates to his work. And it was really, I sat right beside him on his right, got a picture there. You can find that on social media. That was neat. You know, he's also a political figure. He's controversial. I'm not saying I align with all of his beliefs, but it was an honor to speak with him. So that was neat. Cool story. I got to meet, so I'm in the like pavilion section. I'm at a place called the Water and Climate Pavilion, and I'll explain that more later. But I'm hanging out, talking to water people. A guy comments on my mask. I had an Oregon State Beavers mask on. And he's like, oh, do you go to Oregon State? I'm like, yeah, do you? And he's like, no, he actually goes to a university in Amsterdam, long ways away. But his brother works for Oregon State in like their sports marketing department or something like that. So he's visited, and come to find out after a few minutes of discussion, he's studying water. We have the same graduate school advisor. I didn't know. So Dr. Aaron Wolf, he's a big guy in like water conflict management, and he's doing stuff all over the world. I didn't even know he was advising anyone, you know, overseas. But lo and behold, we have the same graduate school advisor. So that was awesome, just to make that connection. I did not meet Greta Thunberg. That would have been cool. But I did get to meet a really cool Filipino climate activist named Marnel Udalbo, who was super cool and really cool to get to know her a little bit. She was actually part of the Christian Climate Observers Program. And then like literally everyone on the Christian Climate Observers Program was just awesome. Like strong Christians who also care about climate and are doing stuff, like really huge community leaders. It was just phenomenal to meet all of them. Very inspiring as well. Okay, so another highlight, and I mentioned this, the Water and Climate Pavilion. Now, let me explain what a pavilion is in COP26. So they have like these areas where world leaders are meeting. It's closed off rooms. So that's one section. Then they have another section that's more like open events, open, people hang out there, people eat there, have, some like open meetings and such. And then they have the pavilion section. And it's kind of like an organization fair, except the organizations have really big booth areas that are almost mini buildings, and the organizations sometimes are countries that are showcasing what they're doing for sustainability, or big businesses that are showcasing their stuff on climate change and sustainability. So it was really cool. And this was actually the first year in COP26. So there's been 26 COP events. It was the first year that they've had a water and climate pavilion, which kind of shows how maybe how undervalued water is in connection to climate. It's been said that if climate change is a shark, water is its teeth. And that's so true in the way that climate change is already impacting water resources. It's a big deal, and we are going to have to learn how to be more resilient with our water, which is what I'm learning about in grad school. Good stuff. But so I was at this place, and I actually got to work with these people organizing the Water and Climate Pavilion. It's kind of a group of different people pulling this together and making it happen. Specifically, I got to work with the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. And I know the president, John Matthews. He actually lives in Corvallis, and he's done some stuff with Oregon State University. So I knew him, got to meet and work with some people on his team, Ingrid Timbo and Kari Davis, and then also Jen Jun from the Stockholm International Water Institute. So working with those folks to do a quick questionnaire of people at COP26 to see how much they understood about the connections between water resources and climate change. And I actually got to do this for credit. I needed one more credit at Oregon State University in something like stats and methods research. And I got to do this questionnaire, and I'm in the process of writing a report to cover that credit. So that was cool. That was another highlight for sure. Next question. I want to talk briefly about representation because that was a big deal here. So basically, I think you had about 40,000, is the number I heard, people at COP26. But there were a lot of concerns raised about the representation there, because this is world leaders. This is like presidents and CEOs of corporations and such. And there were like regular people there. There were indigenous people there, but not probably enough to have a good representation. So, you know, I could go on about this, but I think the cost was definitely a barrier. It cost me, I think, well, like, so the total to get me there was over $2,000. This is coming from Oregon to Scotland, and so that was the thing, and that is a point that I wanted to bring up. Next question is, okay, was COP26 a failure or a success? There have been a lot of headlines about this. Greta Thunberg, middle of COP26, after the first week, it's a 2-week event. Middle of the event, she said that COP26 was a failure. You know, it depends on how you look at it. Overall, we know what to do about climate change, but we are not doing it fast enough. When it gets down to the details of what happens and how to pay for it, especially, and how to have a just transition where we're not like, you know, losing a bunch of jobs. We're not like destroying the livelihoods of people in certain industries so that we get a, you know, overnight turnover in industries and energy and such like that. It's a big deal. That's the just transition idea of, okay, we need to transition to more renewables and stuff, but how can we do that fairly and make sure that we're not leaving a bunch of people out to dry? So I wanted to go over some kind of key achievements of COP26, what some of the world leaders there were able to accomplish. One of those was about deforestation. Leaders from over 400 countries, including Brazil, China, Russia, and the US, made an agreement to end deforestation by 2030. So that's a big deal. That could be promising. It has been criticized for its lack of detail and how the agreement is actually going to work, but that's a thing. Another big thing was that India made a commitment to achieve net zero emissions, but by the year 2070, which is pretty late. And so there's some concern over that just not being soon enough to make the progress we need to make. Another key highlight was an agreement on methane. Again, over 100 countries came together to say we need to cut methane emissions, and they're going to try to cut methane emissions by 30% by the end of the decade. The Biden administration from the US was a big part of this push as well. Then another thing that the US was a big part of, actually joining with China, which surprised a lot of people, was a push to phase down coal. Now, there was also a lot of criticism about this because originally the wording of the agreement was to phase out coal entirely. And certain groups were able to kind of manipulate the language of this agreement and strong-arm other countries with less political clout and less power into signing on anyway, which is not great. So it was going to be phase out coal. Now the language in this agreement is to phase down coal, which is not exactly where we need to be. So that's that. So those are some of the tangible agreements that came out of COP26. I don't think that the agreements coming out of this event are the only metric for success. I think one of the biggest benefits of such an event, well, there's two. One, it draws a lot of media attention to the climate crisis, which gets more people thinking about it, more people thinking about what they can do and solutions. And then for the people that are able to go there, not just the high level world leaders, but the mid-level world leaders, people in administrations who are actually getting work done, forming agreements, building relationships, working together to solve problems. They are able to meet in person and network and make plans, share ideas, which is a huge kind of place where big things start and progress is really made. So for example, I was able to network there, meet a lot of people that I will probably work with later in life. And that is really big. So for me, it was a success to go to this, but I recognize that as a whole, the world is not nearly doing enough, fast enough to solve the climate crisis. All right, next question. Key takeaways. What are my key takeaways from the event? I already talked about us not doing it fast enough. Personally, a takeaway for me was I tried to do too much and have like fit too much into my days. There, it was early mornings, late nights. I ended up getting really tired, and the last day that I was supposed to take off and enjoy and travel around a little bit in Scotland, I just slept until noon because I was exhausted and I needed it. So, future lesson for me: take a day off and don't overwork when you're trying to do something like this. It's really easy to do. Other takeaways: change is slow when you're trying to get a bunch of world leaders together to form a consensus on something. It's slow. I was able to sit in on one of the essentially like private, very low access meetings with world leaders, world delegates, on loss and damage. Now, loss and damage is the idea that the countries responsible, and mostly responsible for climate change, are the developed countries. And most of the burden, the consequences, the death tolls, the catastrophic natural disasters that are worse because of climate change, those impacts are felt dramatically more by developing countries. That's not fair. And so the idea of loss and damage is that these developing countries get a large amount of financial compensation that from developed countries, they're paying money, or maybe should pay money, to these developing countries to help them out with these problems. Yeah, it's pretty complicated, and how that really happens, who pays for it. And so it was slow. They were wordsmithing. This event was supposed to be an hour. It ended up being an hour. Oh, it was I think it was over 2 hours actually, where they were trying to wordsmith a certain agreement, and one by one, each of these groups were having delegates suggest changes to the document. And it was kind of this slow pace of progress that I think is what angered a lot of people at the pace of what was really happening. Towards the end, well, throughout COP26 in the streets of Glasgow, there were a lot of protests and marches, especially towards the end. On that Friday, when I was there, I was able to go to a protest where it was estimated about 20,000 were in the streets. The next day, there was an even bigger one that might have had 40,000. I don't know, but a lot of people very upset about what world leaders were doing, and mainly what they're not doing. Yeah, so that's that. Last big takeaway for me as a Christian was hope. And so it's very sad, the pace that we're able to do things, and knowing the damage that it's causing, the climate change is causing, and not seeing world leaders and people come together fast enough to make a big difference or even a response. is sad, is depressing, and is intimidating. Um, the thing is, as a Christian, my hope is ultimately not in what we can do to save the world. Um, my hope is in the life after this one. And my mission is to save souls, not necessarily save the earth. Now that still doesn't mean that the earth is worthless. And the reason I care about climate change is because it is a very clear way where I can be the hands and feet of Jesus and love my neighbor. And it is a very clear way that I can steward natural resources as we're called to as people in the book of Genesis, and to be obedient to God from that. But ultimately, the world could burn and I would still be okay. Because my hope is not ultimately in solving the climate crisis. It's in representing Jesus well and glorifying God, and in going on missions for Jesus. So that's that. As Christians, we have a hope, a very deep hope that a lot of people don't have, and a lot of people are very in need of this hope in the face of huge, intimidating things like climate change. So that's a huge message that I want to make sure is clear here. To wrap it up, some thank yous I have to give. The Christian Climate Observers leadership team, thank you guys so much for making this happen, making it happen, for your donations to get a lot of us there or help us out. Huge thank you too from my home church in Corvallis, Oregon, Grace City Church made a donation to get me there. Family friend Susan Arnold, thank you so much for your donation. And my brother Jedediah Shaver, thank you so much for your donation. Also, my brother Jedediah Shaver, he has a YouTube channel, go check it out. Thank you guys for tuning in, for watching this. You can follow me, also like and subscribe if you want to for this YouTube channel. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. So stay tuned. Next up is probably going to be next adventure for Josiah Shaver. Is probably going to be a trip to Israel, Palestine, and Jordan for school with Oregon State University. I'm helping organize this trip to the Jordan River Basin with my advisor, Dr. Aaron Wolf. It's going to be amazing. We're in the process of fundraising. That's going to be spring break 2022. So God bless, stay tuned, and I'll talk to you guys later.